Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Bard Room. We have Lizzy Booth with us, and this is a special edition as an interview and a conversation about Shakespeare in education, especially for the younger, the elementary age, the tween, middle school age, and should we emphasize it? Should we uh, do more of it? Should we save it for high school like we usually do, and then college? And is it beneficial to take a look at it when we are, Lizzy started in third grade, that type of thing. It does it depend on the individual? Does it depend on homeschooling versus public schooling versus private schooling? Are you able to handle language? And some people are not able to handle it at all and just walk away from it. And then that's that. So that type of thing where with the idea of learning languages like French and Spanish was um, sort of being toyed with when I was growing up, and then it got more uh, important for people to do that for several different reasons. So I think we have from COVID, we have a lot of Shakespeare regeneration, regermination, and that is because for the most part, um, we don't have to pay for the rights, so it's cheap. We can still do it. We can do it online. We can do it in a room with vaccinated people. We can do it on Zoom. We can, we can do it over the phone, that type of thing. And we can record it. We can put it on YouTube. We can put it on our websites. We can do reels and stuff like that. So that, Shakespeare has been since I was alive, always been free to do. And the other stuff, obviously the Greeks are too, and all the other classics up to a certain point. So, and it still has popularity a lot of the time. So, Lizzy, we're going back in years for you. Let's see, that would be around 8 or 9 years old. So tell us what the 8 or 9 year old Lizzy did when she got into learning this stuff.
Yes. So it was my first year homeschooling. I had gone to private school up until this point. Um, and it was one of my first days being homeschooled. My aunt set up a little classroom in our basement, and we were in there, and she was like, "We're going to read A Midsummer Night's Dream." And I was like, "Really? That's like big kids stuff." And then she was like, "We're going to do it." Um, and I remember when I first saw it, I saw the book. I was like, "That's a big book," Like we were reading it out of the collection of plays, um, and my aunt, I think, picked that for the purpose of intimidating me at first, to kind of say like, this is the world of Shakespeare and we're going to delve into it, and it's some tough stuff. And I was always the kind of kid, especially with English, who just wanted to challenge myself. School had been boring in my English classes, so this was a new experience for me. um, and so when we first started reading the plays, my aunt would expressively read the lines out to me. And she always told me that Shakespeare's plays were meant to be performed live.
Mm-hmm.
And she would say that the relationships that the characters had are still relevant today. And I remember she would read a part and then ask me to compare it to something in my life, to see something, uh, a relationship in my life that reflected the relationships of the characters. Did I
Right.
know any like slightly older girl who had like a really big crush on this guy who her mom or dad didn't like, kind of thing?
Right.
um, and all that kind of stuff. And that was an invigorating experience. I got to gossip about all the
Right. Yeah.
people in my life and make
Yeah.
connections and
Right.
and
Right.
stuff like that. Um, and then that year, we started a Shakespeare club for our homeschool group slash community. Um, and so it was mostly homeschoolers. We had some non-homeschoolers as well. And we decided to put on a production of the play. So that started in, Shakespeare in the Park, and it was mostly our parents in the audience kind of thing. And um, I remember that first year I was given the part of Puck. Um, and it was really overwhelming because I was like, whoa, I get a big kid part, right? It was like
Yeah.
that's a thick little part right there. But I really got to I worked on it really, really hard with my aunt and my mom. We ran lines just about every day. And my aunt would always help me by asking me questions and helping me relate it to my life. And that helped me understand the experience. And also just being in that environment really boosted my confidence. Um, and having other kids my age in the show also really boosted my confidence, because previously, like you said, Shakespeare is typically a high school thing, it's not like for little kids. But this was an unabridged version of A Midsummer Night's Dream. We had a couple lines cut here and there, because it was mostly kids, but
Yeah.
overall it was unabridged Shakespeare just handed to us, and we were encouraged to pick it up and to celebrate it, and it was a great experience.
Did you with homeschooling, just in general, are you tested?
Yeah, so it depends on what kind of system you do and also what state you live in. But for me, I did a curriculum. So we had to send it was with a school in California. So I always had to send my quarter tests and things like that
Mhm.
to the school to make sure that they were all nifty and they were all
Sure. Yeah,
approved
yeah.
and everything.
Yeah. Protocol.
Um, yeah, but
Yeah.
it really depends on the decisions that your parents make at
Right,
that
right.
age. Yeah.
Well, the reason I'm asking is this an extracurricular? Did you get tested on it, or was it just extracurricular, type of like a sport?
It was extracurricular for me until I think fifth grade. And then I think I skipped a couple, like I kind of skipped a grade in English. Homeschooling's bizarre because you
Oh, I
can
know, I
ask
know. Yeah,
like a 12-year-old and you're like, what grade are you in? And they might
yeah,
say, I don't know,
yeah.
because they might be on grade level for one subject and then ahead in a couple other subjects,
Right,
whatever.
right.
There was a point where it started being a part of my official curriculum, but at that point it was extracurricular pretty much.
Okay, so that's pretty cool that if it started being in your curriculum at fifth grade.
Yeah.
Um, we're doing Two Gentlemen of Verona with a couple other people that are homeschooled, and they, it is extracurricular for them, but they have a lot of those. They have, I mean,
Mm.
obviously they have sports that they do extra, that's totally outside of their homeschooling. But I think what it is the homeschool has room for it.
Mhm.
In public schools and in private schools, sometimes there's not room, especially in the younger years. There's not a lot of room for it. Just as briefly as I can, I've been teaching and directing Shakespeare for 30 years in so many different aspects. So I remember teaching, oh God, they were like third graders, but the only thing that I could do with them, in my esteemed opinion, this was a while ago, was the mechanicals from Midsummer Night's Dream. They could understand the mechanicals from Midsummer Night's Dream, and maybe even some of the Puck scenes and stuff like that, because it was fantasy, and these are people that you could relate to, and they were caricatures, and it's like what I would always say is, remember that Disney show when that stock character was doing this to
Yeah.
that stock character. This is where Midsummer is coming from, and they got it. Um, and then I did summer things at a college called Naugatuck Valley Community College, called Kids on Campus, where we do a Shakespeare every year, but make it abridged as much as possible. And some of the, again, you have large groups and you have small groups. You got to figure that out. You may have to do scenes from it, stuff like that. And then uh, I did it for high schools. We were just talking about, I did it for middle schools when I taught at Memorial Middle School, and that was my eighth grade drama class, and that Lizzie and I were talking about this thing called the Globe Theater version of things. The Globe Theater version of any play, I don't know if they have them all done that way, but the big ones, the As You Like It's and all that, are available from the Globe in Washington D.C. So they abridged completely abridged them to be like an hour long. And for Shakespeare aficionado, they're going, oh my God, that what we miss so much, in this play. It's like, how can you do that? But it is a good introduction to the story. And I think, and I'm leading up to a point here, I think that Shakespeare stories, I've seen this book, it's called Shakespeare Stories. That's a good way to start into it, because those are not written obviously in iambic pentameter or in the verse or in the text and verse that he would do. And obviously they're much shorter, but you can start with those. And what are they like? They're like fairy tales, even if you're writing about Hamlet, it's still a tale, it's a story. And I think that's a beneficial way of starting out.
Yeah, I remember actually, in addition to the actual plays, my aunt would always supplement that with a reading of it was like a fairy tale version of almost of the play. So it was, I forget the company that produced these books, but there were books that contained a lot of drawings and little like love letters written by students who were my age. So it was, the little fairies drawn by third graders, and they might write like a little note next to it, like, I put the flower in his hair because he's Puck, and this is, the purple flower or whatever.
Right.
And then there were other kids who would try and write little love poems or love notes to the characters. So like for example, there was like, I can't find you in the forest and it makes me so sad, where have you gone, I love you, kind of things, very childish, but understanding it from those perspectives also was really fun, just being in community with other kids and seeing what other kids have to say and getting excited about it with other kids is also just such a great way to learn.
So I think we are also talking about choice, the choice of the play. You can't take Titus Andronicus and give it to a third grader because there's incredible violence and rape in it and stuff like that. So you don't start off with Titus Andronicus. That may happen in college, or that may happen post-college or grad school, or even wherever they are at. But you do start with Midsummer. You start with a Midsummer. You start maybe with Two Gentlemen of Verona. We're figuring that one out, which is much simpler. We're figuring that, as you were talking about, this guy likes this girl, but this guy likes this girl more, blah, blah, blah. And then I think you stick with the comedies, The Taming of the Shrew, stuff like that. And I think it's a progression in that way. Whereas you get into your tweens, and the tweens love the violence of the whole thing. Oh, there's sword fighting in Hamlet, or there's witches in the Scottish play, or there's, backstabbing in King Lear, that type of thing. And then you just bring it up through high school, even though they have to be taught how the language works. Now, when you were young, did you, or let's say, let me ask you this way, what age did you finally figure out that iambic pentameter needed to be studied and learned, and versus text and all the Shakespeare knowledge had to be applied?
That wasn't, honestly, that definitely didn't come at first. But that being said, it was funny because I was very reliant on the meter and on Shakespeare style when it came to memorizing lines, to the point because I was so immersed in like rehearsing Shakespeare plays and working with Shakespeare for the stage, that when I started doing contemporary theater, it was so much harder to memorize those lines. And I think that was when I really noticed that the meter meant so much. Like, it was such an intrinsic part of Shakespeare's writing. and then studying that style, I would say maybe about maybe sixth or seventh grade when I started studying other styles of like poetry and things like that, where I
Mhm.
just really started talking in my English classes about meter and about things like that. Um, but it was funny because it was in my brain because I was exposed to it before I understood what I was exposed to, kind of thing. Yeah.
Also, I think it's influenced. We were just talking during Two Gentlemen Verona about Catholicism versus Protestantism, and I think maybe I know you're probably interested in history, especially at that time. So did you put those two, like those humanities? Did you put them together
Yeah,
to
you
say?
mean like studying history
And
alongside that? I
right,
mean, that's a major thing. I mean, also, one of the earlier plays that I read was Romeo and Juliet because although it's a tragedy, it has that, essential
sure,
understanding
yeah,
of, oh, they love each other, simple
right,
kind of thing, and and
right,
and
right.
they don't like each other, and the very
Yeah,
simple like
yeah,
dichotomy between the families kind of thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But that play, the you need to understand like Juliet couldn't be really in public without a chaperone, like that was improper. And
Hmm.
why is that? It's because of the time, it's because of the
Hmm.
history. So what did the world look like back then? I remember my aunt had books of like the costumes, and she had little like characters that you could like, what are they called, the puppet things that
Oh
are
yeah,
like the dolls, the paper
yep,
dolls that you could
yep, yep,
dress in the
yep.
Shakespeare costumes. And I would always like doodle them because I loved art.
Right,
Um, like the history really helps put it into context. So I think it's really important that you're given the whole bigger picture of it while relating it to the modern world. Because these things that you're understanding, they last forever. The human
right,
condition doesn't change, but
right.
the times do, kind of thing.
Right. So we're gonna go back to a little bit of Frome as a high school student, and he really really didn't get it. He couldn't get it. Like meaning me. I couldn't get it. I couldn't understand it. I couldn't understand the. And what sparked an interest in it was going to a Ren fair. I
Mm.
went to a Renaissance fair, the one up in New York, Sterling, and I just fell in love with it. But they were doing a Shakespeare play, and I sat there. I don't think they do these anymore. And I sat there as it was a mock up of a Globe Theater, and I was like, "This is everything." I mean, I used to play with knights. I used to play with knights and horses and stuff like that. And this is all. So it comes into that realm,
Mhm.
like you're talking about historically or with other poetry, but it comes into that realm, and then you can have an avenue into it. All right, and so therefore, in college, I went to a college that was very heavy on Shakespeare training, and so if you didn't do it, you were out.
Mm.
So what I did was I sat and I watched all the videos um, of all the BBC versions of all the Shakespeare plays that I was learning. Had the book in front of me, but I was watching too. And as you were saying earlier, it needs to be watched, as I think your aunt was telling you. That type of thing. So what I'm saying is something sparks something. You were sparked in third grade because someone that you trusted and loved said, "Here, check
Yeah.
this out," and then you got into it. So let's bring Lizzy up to speed a little bit. Let's go past. When did you do Shrew for me? What year were you in?
I was 16.
Right.
So,
So we're in 16.
yeah. I don't, what grade was that? Maybe,
We a junior,
yeah.
roughly.
Yeah. Something like
Yep.
that.
You had a few under your belt from your homeschooling. And uh did it broaden for you? Did the live stuff with the adults makes better sense for you?
It
How did that
was
affect you?
it was incredible because I had done Taming of the Shrew in my like previously, kids and teenagers. Um, but seeing it, this is my first community theater show in general. So seeing it
Okay.
being performed by adults and seeing it come to life in a very realistic way was absolutely incredible. I
Did it dis
also
did it disappoint you that I've modernized it,
No,
or were
I
you
was
okay
I
with
was
that?
just about to say that.
Yeah.
Because all of the shows that I had done previously were very, traditional Renaissance. We wore the big dresses and stuff. So, I guess to an extent, like my expectation wasn't that, oh, I want to wear the big puffy dress. Like that wasn't why I auditioned for the show, where I feel like there are a lot of kids who might join like a Shakespeare play for that reason, the costume, the fencing or whatever it is, like those dynamics. But I auditioned for it because one, I loved Shakespeare, and two, I loved the stage, and I thought it would be a great opportunity to, immerse myself in that environment. So um I loved the modern take, and because the thing is, when there are modern takes that use like guns, or modern takes that completely change the dynamics between the characters, like we were kind of talking with Two Gentlemen of Verona, like the waitress and the,
Oh, right. Yeah.
like when you're completely changing the dynamics of the characters, that's when I don't like uh I don't like the modern takes on Shakespeare. But when you're taking something that's timeless and you're exploring it artistically in a different setting, I think that that's so rewarding, and it just brings certain things to light in a new fun way. It's just a new way to play. Yeah.
Let me explain what you were saying, because we were watching a version of it by the RSC, I think maybe done 6 years ago, and it was a beautiful set, gorgeous, it always is. But I think it was the 1960s, Verona little cafe, and they had the red and white claws on the bar in the barbershop chairs around the little tables, and Lucetta is being played by a waitress. But we were saying that Lucetta would never be a waitress if she was a waiting gentlewoman on um, uh,
Julia.
Julia, right? Not Sylvia, Julia. So yeah, this is what you're saying. It just completely changes things. It's novel in some sort of way. It's like, are we tuned into it, or are we going to be sitting there thinking, wait, that doesn't work, that type of thing. So
Mm.
most of the audience will accept it and stuff like that. But yeah, so you got introduced in a full length performance of a Shakespeare with adults. Obviously, I updated it to 1930s Padua, um, and I love my costumer. I love the set design. I love the lighting. It just really worked. I keep watching it. It's so nice. And Lizzie, you played a smaller part, but then on to Tempest, am I right?
Mhm.
And then you were Miranda, which was also a modern spin, which I put in P.T. Barnum, 1900, 1910, something like that, the circus type of thing. Um, did you, to me, you seem to have grown every year into taking on larger parts
Yeah.
in Shakespeare. And I know you do all these other different theaters, and all these other different plays. But what was the differentiation there? Did you feel that you were growing as an actress in this genre?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, as well, Taming was my first community theater show, period. So um like the biggest audience I had performed in front of was maybe like 200 people, and it was like for a weekend, like it was never uh big audiences, or at least substantial audiences regularly for like 10 shows. I never had that experience. So getting used to that setting was very new for me, um to begin with. So, and I loved getting to know how it worked, and just like
Mhm.
the complexities of it. Um Even aside from it being Shakespeare, just being my first play in that setting, like
Right.
Morgana was really helpful to me because we had very similar parts. So it's funny because I I just turned 21, and she and a few other people took me to a bar, and she was
I saw those
showing me
pictures.
and she was showing me how to order and like everything, and I was
That's
thinking
great.
of Taming, like she
Yeah.
very. And also we just did Night of the Assassins together. Like she's very much been like an older sister to me
Hmm.
throughout the whole experience.
Yep.
um But developing those relationships was also like, it was very new to me. So I think I grew as well because I was getting accustomed to the setting of that the theater community. But also with Shakespeare, I mean, being pushed by adult actors to really up my game and try and meet their standards and be on their level. It was an inspiring environment to be in, kind of thing. So
Yeah, and a memory of that, for example, is John Bergdahl, who played Caliban, who I went to college with for theater. Incredible actor, and he he's been doing a lot. So he's my age. He's been doing a lot. And when he and you went head to head in that scene, Caliban and Miranda, it was electric. And I saw you up your game. I saw you
thank you.
match, and John said it too. It was just, it was just electric. So now you're up in your game. Now you're with the adults. I throw you in. I throw you into Much Ado About Nothing at JCC as hero, which is another heroine. Anything change, or it just keeps getting better and better? Or?
Yeah, I feel like at that point I had a somewhat newfound confidence as well, because I felt comfortable. It wasn't just a new environment, but it was an environment that I felt safe and comfortable in. So and I think that that's very big for me in any theater experience, is to be somewhere that is a safe space. I think that that's up to a director to always kind of set, during your first read through, like let's have discussions, let's encourage this discussion. And that's what I love so much about you as a director, is just the fact that we're always discussing and we're always understanding and working harder to understand the characters, and understand the scenes and understand the little minor complexities that don't quite make sense the first time you're reading it, but have to make sense for our world. There were definitely even moments in Much Ado where we had that. I don't remember exactly where, but where you had to like figure out like little minor things like all the time, and it was like a safe space and a fun place to do that. So yeah, I think that Hero was it was very fun for me. That was also I don't do a lot of musicals. Like I don't I don't have
until we hear your voice.
Yeah. Steve asked me to audition for the Panto, and then I auditioned for the Panto and I did the Panto, and then Robin's like, you need to sing in the beginning of Much Ado. And I was like, okay. But that too, it pushed me and encouraged me in a safe place, which amped my confidence and made me feel ready for especially the explosive emotions that Hero goes through. I needed to be ready for that, and Danny was such a great scene partner. I don't know if you knew this, but that was my first kiss too.
Mr. Tarantino. Wow.
So that was funny. It had to be a safe place, that play was a lot of new experiences for me. So
and what's interesting is that was Danny's first Shakespeare, and it was a lot of people's first ones. It's just grabbing, plucking people, and it's actually a larger cast than I thought it was going to be, or that I remembered it was going to be. And so but I think it worked out that well too. Yeah, and we spend the time to study and stuff like that. So as I said this to my Death Trap cast, is like, I I watch an English whatever would be National Theater or something like that, and they're coming into rehearsal at 8 o'clock in the morning, and they don't leave till 5 o'clock at night. That's their 8 to 5. Why don't we have that? Why can't we ever have that? And so we have very precious little time to get this stuff down. And unfortunately, there's a lot of homework that we're not around each other for, that type of thing. But I mean, can you imagine? I mean, going, 9 to 5 every day, like a regular job, and just and just going through this stuff and having conversations, and it's just that's why the shows are so amazing for the most part. So we go through that now. COVID, of course, and you did a few of my bard room stuff with Shakespeare plays, and I think you got some out of that too. But it's like this. It can be very sterile unless we can make it a good time as much as we can. And when we did the bard room stuff, I'm still doing those. We can add in conversations that I find on YouTube or tutorials or this version from 1938 and this version from 1974 and this version from yesterday, that type of thing. So I think I'm glossing over this because it was basically the same type of experience throughout. Anything did you want to say about that, or is it kind of like you were cloistered but still working on it?
Well, as far as the bard room, I have one thing to say about this. As far as the bard room being sterile, I disagree.
Okay,
I don't think
all right.
it's ever. I don't think it's ever uneventful, and I think because no matter what, it's an experience to take a test or take a text, excuse me, and experience it in a new way. And every time you're doing that, it's an opportunity to learn, and even those days where we don't have a lot of thoughts or we don't have like a lot of necessarily things to be like, oh, let's talk about this. It gives us the experience to just sit with the play and to absorb it. And even though it might not be something that we can easily give out of ourselves through conversation, it's in us. And that's an experience that lasts forever in a way. So
it's
that's my note on that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's kind of a glorified book club, which, but again, we were, sort of cloistered for a few years, and then it got a little better, and then back and forth, and it's better now. But what are you going to do? So we did as much as we could. We got involved in it as much as we could. We could do the readings. We could talk to each other on these boxes here as the best that we could. So I'm just throwing that in as, for posterity with this historical thing, because now you have done a few shows. I'm assuming unmasked, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. You've done a few shows at Brookfield, and now you're doing Peter and the Starcatcher in Ridgefield, but you are in the midst of applying for Stella Adler. Tell us about that.
Yes. So throughout high school, I started really thinking about acting as something that I wanted to go into professionally. And it really did begin with my love for Shakespeare. I mean, prior to that, in elementary school, when I went to private school, I did the school plays, but once I got into Shakespeare, and I started doing Shakespeare plays, I was like, I want to be a classical actor. I want to do Shakespeare. I want to go up to like Chekhov. I want to do Ibsen. I want to do like all of the things that are a little bit more classy or whatever.
You heard it here. You heard it here.
And not that Ibsen is classical. He's technically contemporary, but still, he has the classical vibe, but the Victorian, the sensibilities. But anyways,
I have to tell you that there's two schools on that thought, and this goes back into the 80s. There are, if you're auditioning and they want a contemporary piece, a lot of them won't take the Ibsen and they won't take the Chekhov because they've put that into the classic lane. So
which I feel like they should, but
I know it's such a weird thing, but it's still, I think the word they're talking about is stylized. So they want you to do something that is not stylized, that that you can do tomorrow, that you could just be contemporary. Go ahead.
Yeah, although I do have to say, I've done 2 shows now at the Powerhouse Theater in New Canaan. I did First Ladies in Retirement, and then a couple months ago, Turn of the Screw, and
That's
they were
right.
both plays that were written in the 20th century, but set in like the Victorian era kind of thing. And you could feel it. You could feel that they weren't written previous to the 1900s. You could
Yes.
feel
Yeah.
that they
Yeah.
were imitating like an older style.
Yeah.
I especially felt it when it came to memorizing lines. I don't know why. I don't know if I have the vocabulary to describe the that little difference, but you can feel it. But anyways, back to what I was saying.
Yeah.
So when I was in high school, um, I did a couple of Stella Adler's programs. I did their teen conservatories on the weekends, and I also did their New Works Performance Intensive, which was a summer program for 5 weeks. And whenever I studied Stella Adler's technique, and especially whenever I was at the studio, it really felt like a home. I really love Stella's whole technique, engaging with the imagination. I think that it's so fun, and it's creative, and it really encourages you to think uh and to make choices. So the professional conservatory is something that I've wanted to apply to after graduating college forever. I mean, I honestly in high school I did a dual credit program so that I could get a bunch of credits, go through college quickly, and then act. That was my
Right.
goal.
Yeah.
So
Right. Right.
I'm graduating in 5 weeks or something, which is exciting. But
Mm-hmm.
um I applied to Stella Adler's Professional Evening Conservatory, and I got a call back. I just submitted it a few days ago. So
Good.
I'm waiting to hear what happens there, because that would really be a dream to study there for the next 2 years or whatever. So we'll see how that goes.
What is entailed in the audition process?
They had you do a contemporary or realism monologue and a classical monologue. So right now, because of the pandemic, they're doing the initial audition over Zoom. So yeah, I met with one of the heads of the program, and it was a really great audition because he really gave me a lot of information about my monologues, as far as what he saw my strengths being and what he saw my weaknesses
Mm-hmm.
being,
Good.
um which really helped me prepare for my callback. And it was incredible because it was like, I did, 2 90-second monologues, and then he could pinpoint all of my strengths and weaknesses as an actor. And um it was very informational. And then I started realizing, like, yeah, those are my weaknesses, yeah, those are my strengths, like I should lean into that more and I should avoid that more. And it made me start thinking about everything. Like it was very informational. I had never really had that experience before where it just completely like pinpointed everything that I needed to work on and everything that I needed to celebrate more.
Okay. So two questions. What were the pieces?
So I did Rosalind's epilogue from As You Like It, and
Mm-hmm.
I did Ibsen's the Regina monologue from Ibsen's Ghosts that
Okay.
I like very much. I was
Right. And
gonna
those.
go with something more contemporary, and then I saw that they put contemporary slash realism,
Yeah. There you go. Yeah.
and I was like,
Yeah. I
yeah,
know. I know. I know.
yeah.
It's very tempting. Um, Now those are both 90 seconds.
Mm-hmm. I
Wow.
I cut the epilogue a little tiny bit,
Mm-hmm.
um just to fit it, and then the Regina monologue's about 90 seconds. Yeah.
Okay, it's interesting. So w- he is. I'm not going to say criticizing you, but he's giving you a critique
Mhm.
of your audition. Do you think that it is a disservice to your audition to do it over Zoom, or would it have been the same critique if you were in person?
Um, I mean, to an extent, both yes and no, because the critique that he gave me that had to do with my acting as it was acting, I think would have been the same. He did give me a critique as far as movement, because we're on Zoom. Like, it's tricky. I was sitting in this chair for my audition, because it was an audition slash interview,
Right.
but for the callback, it was a self tape, so he gave me some notes as to how I might go about that instead of sitting in a chair, which were, very welcomed, because when I'm on Zoom, I can't really set up my
Yeah,
laptop anywhere else.
I know.
So
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
it was one of those kinds of things. But as far as my acting, I think that what he noticed and what he said was pretty indicative of my strengths and weaknesses regardless. But he did give me some, like I said, some notes about movement and knowing the space of the camera and having to deal with that, which is it's an added challenge for sure.
Right. So what they're testing is your direct ability. I mean,
Yeah.
if you can take these notes and do them again, or do them to their specifications, then you've got a shot. So tell me what the program entails. Let's say you get in. What do you do?
So I've done some of their programs in the past, I already know what a lot of their classes look like generally. So they have voice and speech, which is, your typical articulation and things like that, but it's also kind of the beginnings of a movement class. It's a lot about breathing and a lot about getting in touch with your body, kind of thing. They have a movement class, which has to do with the physicality of acting and all that stuff. They have scene study classes, technique classes where they explore Stella's technique. They have improv classes, and your day is kind of combined of all of those things. And then in the second year, there's a Shakespeare class, a stage combat class, a business of acting class.
Mm-hmm.
You just kind of get all of the
Yep.
experiences shoved in those 2 years. And I have some friends who have gone both to the programs that I did and then also the professional conservatory. And one of them told me that, Stella is a very Shakespeare heavy studio. And
Okay. Good.
from my experience, I already kind of know that. The one of the
Mhm.
first things that we did in a voice and speech class for the teen conservatories was the prologue to Romeo and Juliet, just
Mhm.
over and over and over again.
Mhm.
So that's like a really big thing. They incorporate Shakespeare into a lot of their classes. So
Yeah.
that's
Because
fun.
that's great, and some conservatories do that, and some don't. And so here's the thing: looks like you guided yourself to where you could be, with
Yeah.
all of the training that you got through the productions that you did, and all from Shakespeare or to the contemporary stuff, and then it hopefully will culminate in these next 2 years, if you get chosen. Now, is this intense, like every day, every night
Yes.
thing?
So
Right.
I can't remember if it's 4 days a week or 5 days a week, but it's
And what's the certificate, or if there is one, or a degree, or
you get a certificate of completion of the professional conservatory of Stella Adler's technique.
okay?
Um
And are you
yeah.
able to get showcases at the end of it? Are you able to
Yeah, so
audition?
from what I understand, the first year is very much about the rehearsal. It's very much about, growing as an actor in that stage. And the second year is very much about performance. So you have, I believe, some movement shows, you have some
Mhm.
contemporary realism shows, you have some classical shows, usually Shakespeare, and then um all of those give you really their opportunities to perform for an audience at Stella Adler.
Right.
And lately they've been live streaming as well, many of their performances, which is really nice, so you could watch them from wherever. I watched my friend Violet just completed the program last year. So I watched some of Violet's shows and they were brilliant. So yeah.
Awesome. And I'm assuming they have wonderful performance spaces and rehearsal spaces.
Yeah.
And you
So
already know that because you've been there.
yeah,
So,
they did move. But
oh,
their
okay.
studio now is even bigger, which is
Yeah.
awesome. I haven't been to the new location
Okay.
yet, but even the old location was absolutely extraordinary. It's very like, the black box theater kind of vibe. They do a lot of minimal sets, just like but it's all about the craft and the relationships on the stage and that kind of
Right,
thing.
of course, of course.
But yeah.
So, last thing, Plan B.
Yeah.
Have you
So
thought about it? And I don't, you have every shot at this that I can think of. But
thank you.
if there has to be a Plan B, do you have one in mind, or?
Plan B for now would honestly be just for this next year to work, do some more community theater, build up my resume more, try and see if I can apply for some agencies on my own. And just kind of lay low. And then honestly, I want to try one more time
Right, right, yeah, yeah.
to,
Do they
to
do they
audition.
look? Do they take into account the amateur productions that you've done? Do you put them on a resume? Do they look at that?
They do. Technically, I also have not a lot of, but I have a few credits from Stella Adler because the Newark's Performance Intensive was a really nice program. Basically, it was 10 of us, 10 actors. I think we were all teenagers.
Hmm.
And um, we went in a month before the program started and we met 4 playwrights and we were told to bring in articles about contemporary issues. So we all brought in something, we discussed it with these playwrights, and they wound up writing one acts about the issues that we brought in, inspired by
Oh,
us.
okay.
So we got to originate
Oh,
characters in these little one acts that were put up at Stella Adler.
yeah.
So that was really nice. So technically, I also have that on my resume, which is nice. But yeah.
When you were interviewed on Zoom and you auditioned, but during the interview, did they ask you about your experiences on stage at all, or they looked at your resume and said, "Oh, I see you have done this or that." This
Honestly,
is for people that are for future. What should they do on their resumes? Do you feel that you should have done your resume differently? Um,
honestly, I know that Stella Adler specifically, they have like this kind of statement and this kind of belief that they're not looking for professional actors, they're looking for people who love to act, kind of thing.
gotcha. Yeah. Right. Right.
So
Right.
it was a little bit less about your experience. They asked about my experience with the studio because I
Right.
did
Of
have
course.
experience with the
Yeah.
studio.
Right.
um but um yeah, they it was honestly, and also when I auditioned for the teen programs, it was, they didn't ask a lot about my acting experience so much as what I enjoy when it comes to acting or what
Hmm.
actors I look up to, kind of thing.
Oh, okay. That's
More
interesting.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, because I've had a few students, same thing. A couple of students would go to that audition for a neighborhood playhouse I got in, had a wonderful interview, and they just
Mm.
sat, this was before COVID, and they just sat in the office and talked,
Yeah.
one on one. And they said, "Oh, do you have a monologue for us?" And so I was like, I'm glad I gave you a monologue that you didn't have to run around on stage. You could just sit there. The office is like, a postage stamp,
Mhm.
type of thing. So uh, that was interesting. This is funny. The interview was so long, and then, "Oh, do you have anything that you want to perform?" That's
Yeah.
everything, and that's what's happening these days. Not
Mhm.
in every single, an actor studio is different, but not in every conservatory, but in a lot of them, and this has to do with going for jobs for you guys at your age. A lot of it has to do with a personal interview. You can see whatever you are on paper, whatever, whoever gave you, letters of rec and stuff like that. but how do you handle yourself in an interview? You
Mhm.
felt that way, right?
Yeah, especially when I auditioned for the teen programs, it like you said, it was like a little box of an office, like
Right, right, right,
a
right,
little desk, the Krista who runs the teen conservatory, a little couch, and a bookshelf, and then she had me stand up, audition, or actually for the teen conservatories you didn't even have to prepare a monologue or anything. They just wanted to have that conversation. For the New Works Performance Intensive you did have to audition, but it
right,
was,
right,
stand up, don't look at me, go ahead. And there wasn't, you couldn't have a lot of movement, it was a very tight little
right,
space, but
right, right.
yeah.
Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you, Lizzy.
Yes.
This probably will be a start of some other conversations I'll have with other people of other ages that we've acted with in mostly in the Shakespeare or the classical based stuff, and the importance of it and the non-importance of it, and everything in between. But I wanted to talk to you first because I think you have this ladder that you're climbing. I can see it. I can
Thank
see
you.
this ladder that you're climbing. And again, it can be go on a plateau, and then it can go up again and up again and up again. We all have to, and this is coming from the most impatient person you've ever met in your life. We all have to be patient. So
Oh my God, every time I get an email I'm like, ah.
I know, absolutely, absolutely. So thank you. So thanks everybody for watching the Bard Room this time, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.